In this podcast episode, Dr. Dani Sulikowski delves into the evolutionary psychology behind human behavior, with a particular emphasis on female intraexual competition. She explores how women compete with each other over reproductive success rather than absolute reproductive output, and the unconscious nature of much of this behavior. The conversation also examines the strategic and manipulative ways this competition manifests in social behaviors, dating advice, workplace dynamics, and society at large. The asymmetry between male and female reproductive strategies, the cultural and ideological influences affecting women's choices, and the implications of fertility suppression are all explored in depth. Dr. Sulikowski begins by explaining that reproductive success is the currency of evolution, determined not by how many offspring one has absolutely, but how one's reproductive output compares relative to others in the population. Female intraexual competition consists of behaviors evolved to optimize this relative reproductive success, not simply by increasing one's own fertility, but also by inhibiting rivals. Women, therefore, can put their foot on the gas by maximizing their own reproductive potential, or put their foot on the brake by suppressing that of competitors. This competition is largely unconscious, varying across individuals, with conscious awareness playing a limited role. The episode emphasizes that people generally have limited conscious insight into why they behave as they do, including in intraexual competition. When asked about their motivations, individuals fabricate explanations without access to true underlying causes. This means women may often be unaware of the evolutionary consequences of their competitive behaviors, even if they recognize the social nastiness involved. While overt awareness and intentional nastiness certainly exist, as most women have experienced relational aggression or bullying by other women, much behavior lies beneath conscious understanding. Some women, especially influenced by feminist ideologies, may deliberately endorse reproductive inhibiting behaviors, viewing motherhood and traditional relationships as oppressive, harming other women's reproductive success, but framing this as emancipation rather than malice. Physical attractiveness and how women present themselves are central signals in intraexual competition. Women are keenly aware of other women's appearances and the social responses they provoke. When an attractive woman enters a social or workplace environment, she may become a target of jealousy, exclusion, or relational aggression by other women who perceive her as a mating threat. The episode discusses experiments showing how women's behaviors toward the same woman change depending on how sexually available she appears, such as by the amount of skin she reveals. Dressing attractively signals sexual aggressiveness to rivals, often provoking counter-aggression. Contrary to common assumptions, much of women's grooming and dressing up is less about attracting men and more about signaling dominance and competition to other women. Dr. Sulikowski highlights a fundamental asymmetry between male and female competition due to differing reproductive constraints. Men's reproductive success is less biologically limited. Populations can recover rapidly from male losses because fewer men are needed to maintain fertility rates. Consequently, men's competition tends to focus on maximizing their own reproductive success, a gas pedal approach. Women's reproductive output, however, is biologically capped and more critical to population replacement. Thus, females engage in both maximizing their own success and suppressing rivals' fertility, both gas and brake pedals. This results in more complex, manipulative tactics among women, aiming to reduce competitors' reproductive success as well as bolster their own. One major area where female intraexual competition shows is in the advice women give each other regarding relationships, career, and family planning. Dr. Sulikowski describes research revealing women often provide other women with advice that inhibits reproductive success more than they would endorse for themselves. This reproductive suppressing advice favors career investment over childbearing, delays marriage and motherhood, and devalues traditional family structures. These patterns are reflected and amplified in media and social discourse, which increasingly promote themes such as casual sex, relationship skepticism, and independence from men. While such advice is often framed as empowerment or liberation, it serves competitive purposes by reducing rivals' reproductive potential. The persistence and popularity of such ideologies facilitate leaders who promote these messages while often not embodying them fully themselves, alongside followers who adopt and internalize them, sometimes with negative personal outcomes. An extreme manifestation of reproductive suppression discussed involves women in their early 20s electing for permanent sterilization procedures. This trend, bolstered by social signaling and celebration on social media, exemplifies a costly reproductive decision that can result in long-term regret and reduced happiness. Such behaviors are theorized as manipulative signals within intraexual competition, meant to demonstrate freedom from reproductive constraints and influence rivals. However, many women who choose sterilization later seek reversals, illustrating that the evolved psychological mechanisms driving these competitive signals do not reliably optimize individual well-being. This overshoot reflects the tension between manipulative signaling and individual cost. The discussion extends to the rise of LGBTQ+ acceptance, particularly among women, suggesting this trend also functions partly as a form of reproductive suppression. Feminist and gender ideology movements, predominantly supported by women, reduce traditional mating patterns and promote identity and relational structures that can inhibit reproduction. This supports the broader framework where such cultural shifts serve to suppress fertility at the population level through evolved competitive dynamics rather than being purely social or political phenomena. Regarding whether men engage in comparable reproductive suppression tactics, Dr. Sulikowski points out that traditional male competition rarely involves actively sabotaging rivals' reproduction because populations can compensate for lost males. However, in contemporary societies experiencing declining birth rates and institutional feminization, the dynamics may be shifting. Although there is no evolved mechanism in men for reproductive suppression analogous to women's, modern demographic pressures could lead to novel forms of male involvement, though these would be culturally rather than biologically driven. Historically and cross-civilizationally, population declines triggered by female reproductive suppression have been common, signaling the cyclical nature of these dynamics. Declining birth rates and family formation have repeatedly coincided with the collapse or decline of civilizations, such as Rome. These declines are linked primarily to women choosing liberation from traditional family roles and prioritizing career or independence, profoundly affecting overall fertility. This skews mating dynamics, conferring power to fewer high-status men, but also reducing the effective population size capable of sustaining society. Dr. Sulikowski argues that these patterns are not unique or accidental, but part of recurrent evolutionary and cultural cycles in human history, where female reproductive strategies lead to societal shifts and collapses. Dr. Sulikowski notes that, surprisingly, her ideas receive more resistance from men than from women, with women generally acknowledging the truth of intraexual competition due to personal experience as both perpetrators and recipients. Men, invested in defending women and uncomfortable with the implications of such evolutionary-driven perspectives, often reject or misunderstand these insights. Public conversations about birth rate decline and reproductive choices remain highly contentious and emotionally charged, limiting the scope for open discussion. The episode also examines the great feminization of workplaces and institutions, linking women's increased participation to intraexual competition rather than purely maternal or nurturing instincts. Women, seeking advantage in reproductive competition, tend to flatten meritocracies and depress productivity, which reshapes workplace cultures and power structures. This behavior is framed not as an accident or misplacement of natural motives, but as part of deliberate competitive strategies deeply rooted in evolved psychology aimed at reproductive success maximization in the face of societal change. Feminist ideologies have contributed significantly to reshaping female reproductive strategies and social behaviors. By devaluing marriage and motherhood and promoting alternative life choices, feminism aligns with the manipulative reproductive suppression described. Women who advocate these views may sincerely believe in their emancipatory value while unconsciously participating in competitive strategies that reduce the reproductive output of their rivals, thereby gaining relative advantage for themselves or their lineage. A significant portion of the conversation centers on how male behaviors traditionally linked to dominance, protection, and mate attraction are increasingly labeled toxic or unacceptable. This demonization undermines male social dominance and aggression, traits historically preferred by women, disrupting typical male mating strategies. Men respond by adoption of beta behaviors, retreating from traditional masculine roles. This shifts female mate choice preferences and destabilizes the mating market. Men face conflicting messages, social policing breakdown, and fear of false accusations, creating an environment where initiating romantic or sexual advances becomes fraught and risky. Dr. Sulikowski discusses the difficulty men face in navigating modern social contexts where masculinity is devalued and approach behaviors are stigmatized. Young men, fearful of social and legal repercussions, often withdraw from initiating relationships, while women continue to expect men to make the first move. This creates social confusion and reduces opportunities for stable, compatible pairings. Consequently, relationship quality declines, and women may cycle through unsatisfactory partnerships, perpetuating instability in family formation. Throughout the episode, the tension between individual-level interests and broader societal consequences is emphasized. Evolution selects for individual reproductive success relative to others, without regard for long-term societal sustainability. This explains how behaviors that ultimately contribute to societal decline still prosper at the individual level within competitive frameworks. Winners in the reproductive race are those who navigate and exploit these dynamics to their advantage, becoming founders of future populations despite overall demographic collapse. This cyclical process repeats across historical civilizations. Dr. Sulikowski expresses skepticism towards the common evolutionary mismatch narrative, which argues that modern environments are so radically different from ancestral ones that many behaviors are now maladaptive. Instead, she views contemporary social structures and cultural phenomena as extensions of human evolved biology and psychology, shaped and adapted by humans themselves over time. She advocates for explanations rooted in evolutionary coherence rather than assuming widespread behavioral dysfunction due to rapid societal change. The prevalence of reproductive suppression behaviors, career prioritization, and devaluation of traditional family roles in affluent and safe societies create a hostile environment for reproduction. This environment disproportionately harms those with lower reproductive potential, while the elite few maintain reproductive success. Mental health declines, loneliness, and life dissatisfaction are correlated with these trends. The pressures of intraexual competition and shifting social ideologies shape life outcomes in ways that often contradict individuals' conscious desires or well-being. Finally, the episode touches on contemporary challenges in discussing these sensitive topics openly. The interplay of feminist arguments, cultural narratives, and evolutionary psychology creates a fraught discourse where many reflexively resist acknowledging fundamental biological realities underlying social behaviors. Despite the difficulty, Dr. Sulikowski stresses the importance of understanding these dynamics fully to better grasp human social behavior, mating patterns, and the cyclical nature of societal growth and decline.